Well, my latest book is The Pursuit of Italy, which is the history of a land, its regions, and their peoples. It's a long book, and it does actually cover, perhaps overambitiously, the whole of Italian history from the Neolithic age to the premiership of Silvio Berlusconi. And I've always been intrigued by this strange problem with Italy, because in Italy, we know in Europe, this is the country that has probably contributed more to Western culture than any others. And if you ask people, which European country has provided the world's greatest artists, which has provided the world with its best musicians, which has built the most beautiful cities, everybody would put Italy very high on their list, probably their top country. And so much of Italy is very remarkable. Its cuisine, its man-made landscapes. The Italians have made, are leaders in style as far as clothes and fashion and motor cars and many other things are concerned. And yet the fact is, it is a country that's never been able to govern itself satisfactorily. I mean, it is the most corrupt country in Europe. It's the worst governed country in Europe. It is also the country that is least able to deal with the problems of organized crime. There's huge southern mafias in Naples, the Camorra in Naples, the mafia in Sicily, and various other ones. And they kill thousands of people every decade. And Italy doesn't seem to function as a country. And I think the reason is this, is that the imposed unification of Italy in the 19th century was a mistake. There's a country with so much regional culture and so much history, from before the Renaissance, of very successful small states like the Grand Duchy of Tuscany or the Republic of Venice. And the Republic of Venice was one of the most civilized and long successful states in the history of the world. And these were all forcibly united in the 19th century. And a new idea was imposed on them that Italians should become soldiers and colonialists and fascists, all things that doesn't seem to be part of Italian history or part of Italian nature. And it led to the humiliation and defeats in the Second World War. And now Italy is a country that doesn't really function. It may function economically in many ways, and it's obviously much richer than it used to be, but it's not a country that is able to rule itself. So I was very intrigued to find out why, to investigate what had happened. And that was the genesis of my book. I had written about Italy before, some years ago, about 20 years ago, and I wanted to come back to it. But between that, I had, and this is the reason I think I'm in India now, is that I'd become very interested in the British connection with India. And I started with a biography of Lord Curzon, the Viceroy, who had travelled a lot in India as a young man and in the Far East, and then became this very impressive but also very controversial figure, controversial for his partition of Bengal. But he did some great things in India, especially his restoration of Indian monuments. He did an enormous amount of work on Agra, on the Taj Mahal and Fatehpur Sikri. I find him a very interesting man. And then later I wrote a biography of Rudyard Kipling. Again, there's a strong Indian connection, both as a child and when he came back to work in Lahore at the age of 16 as a journalist. I then followed that book I became very interested in the workings of the administration of India during the times of Kipling and Curzon, which is in the late Victorian period. So I began investigating the work of the Indian Civil Service, the ICS, and spent some years going through as many personal papers as I could of district officers, magistrates, judges who had worked in India during the reign of Queen Victoria. And I used to come out here quite a lot. Most of the documents I needed were in British libraries. I came out here to India partly because I like visiting India, and partly because I felt I needed a sense of place. I needed to know the landscape, the terrain, where they were working. And I met also a lot of, I met a few elderly ICS officers in Britain and here, but of course they stopped recruiting in 1937, so now they're all dead. But I had a very good time meeting several of their successors in the Indian Administrative Service, the IAS, the civil servants who joined the service soon after independence. And I was very glad that they regarded themselves as, happily as proud successors of the British civil service. And in fact, the Indian Administrative Service is very carefully modelled on the civil service that Britain set up. So that was a book I much enjoyed researching, and I haven't been in India for a few years, but I'm very happy to be back now. Yes. The title is intentionally ambiguous. It refers partly to the pursuit of Italy by the Italian nationalists of the 19th century in their pursuit of a nation. And they were quite a small minority in the country. It also, I think, refers to the pursuit of Italian nationalists trying to look back to their history. The title also refers to the Italian nationalists' pursuit of a past where they can try and identify parts of their history which might have had an Italian theme. So they would go back to the poet Dante and to Machiavelli as well, to try to find signs of an Italian past, which I don't think exists. And then the third pursuit is my pursuit of trying to find out why Italy was made a nation and whether it was developed well or badly and what the result has been. People are always saying here that how similar Italy and India is. I don't find that. And I think that one very big difference is how the founding fathers of both modern states, the modern state of India and the modern state of Italy, looked at the question of regionalism. And I think the Indian founders were very much wiser in their development of a federal situation, whereas in Italy, the founding fathers tried to prevent any type of regional thing. They didn't want to have Sicilians, Venetians, Tuscans. They wanted to make Italians. They kept saying, how do we make Italians? They wanted to abolish all the different dialects, which was a hopeless thing to do, because at the time of unification, only about 2.5%, 1 Italian in 40, spoke what is now Tuscan. It was a natural place for regionalism, Italy, and that was squashed. Or the Italian governments, successive governments, above all Mussolini, tried to squash the concept of Italian regionalism, and of course it's failed. And that problem didn't happen in India, and partly, for example, that in the end, Hindi was not imposed on those areas that didn't speak it. It's an open question whether Italy survives in its present form as a united state. I'm not certain, but I think if it's going to, its only chance is to become a properly federal country, because at the moment, the businessmen in the north of Italy, competing with the fellow businessmen in Austria or Slovenia, they really resent having to pay such high taxation in order to protect and provide the budgets for the south, places like Sicily and Campania, where they don't feel they have any national ties, because they have never had, until recently, a national history in common. And I think that if Italy is to keep the north within the state, they've got to allow much more regional autonomy. People in those regions to spend their money on their own projects and deal with it like that. It's not an academic textbook, my Italian work. And therefore, though it has a chronology, I have felt I have concentrated on certain themes that I'm particularly interested in. The medieval fresco painting in Siena, for example, because that seemed to me to illustrate a form of communal city government that was, for the Middle Ages, a huge success. I've written also quite a lot about Italian opera, because this is often used as an example of part of the inspiration for the struggle to make a united Italy. I think that's been very overblown. It's been used as propaganda. I don't think Italian opera was such an incentive, an inspiration for the nationalists. So I've taken particular themes that have interested me to illustrate the Italian history rather than gone rigidly, chronologically through the country's history.